live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the Aforza Vertical AI podcast. This is a podcast where we focus on the power of AI for industries and real industry use cases. Really excited this week to be joined by Josh Aranoff, the VP of Global Solution Engineering for Procore, and of course our CEO, Dominic Donato. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Andy. Hey, Josh. Good to see you.
Hey, Andy. Thank you. Dominic, great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Well, as we always like to do, let's just jump straight into it. We want to, understand a bit about what you do and get into those use cases that are resonating. So perhaps, Josh, we start off with a little bit about what you do, Procore, your mission, and what your focus is.
Yeah. So as stated, VP of Solution Engineering worldwide. And so the short version for what that means is that if you're seeing the product in some way, shape, or form, it's usually our team that's doing it. We tend to hire from construction as well. So in order to gain empathy, you need to understand your customer. So we tend to hire from that as well. I think maybe just a little bit on Procore for folks that may not know. Founded in 2002 by our CEO and founder, Tui Kortemanch. And I think big things there, just SaaS software for construction, which was nuanced at the time. Didn't have Wi-Fi on the job site for a little bit. So it's like over time caught a lot of speed, and then IPO in 2021 and crested $1 billion in revenue beginning of this fiscal year. And just Procore overall, the mission is connecting everyone in construction on a global platform. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people who are trying to build the world.
That's cool.
Very good. Dom, lots of synergies there with Aforza, right?
Yeah, well, of course, probably the audience knows Aforza. We're completely about consumer product company. We are dedicated to that industry, the way Josh is dedicated to construction. Really interesting in your introduction, Josh, you talk about hiring from industry. So do we. So like you find in Aforza, you get this great blend of technical experts, CRM experts, and consumer product company experts. So we have people in our company who came from Procter & Gamble, from Carlsberg, from Molson Coors, all over actually. Yeah, if you eat, drink, clean with it, or like or bandage yourself with it, probably somebody in Aforza actually worked in that company.
It's amazing how the hiring profile changes when you get into vertical SaaS.
It's like kind of where, and then at the end, after a couple of years, everybody knows a bit about everybody else's domain of expertise.
Yep. And at some point, you actually want to bring in outside talent as well and pair them with industry talents, right? Because then you're getting best of both and you're kind of pairing those groups together. And that's a fun evolution as well. But anyways, we can get back to the topic of AI.
But the thing that I think that I'd love to hear, Josh, is in construction. So you made a joke in the intro about they didn't have Wi-Fi. So there was this kind of seismic shift, a paradigm shift to actually get these guys onto cloud apps, probably not the first thing they were thinking about when they were building a high rise or something. Like, well, there's another paradigm shift happening like right now with AI, and for us, vertical AI. How are you guys finding it?
It's interesting, right? I think first you have to look at what are the challenges that are being faced in construction overall, right? And that those things don't really change right now. So project predictability is a big one. You think about productivity, right, on the job site. You think about the labor shortage that is out there, right? Skilled workers and bringing them on. And then you have worker safety. And now, especially in Europe, ESG, right? All of the requirements that are coming down. So not only what you build, but are you doing it in a way that can help the environment too and doing it responsibly?
I was going to say ESG, you probably better explain to everyone what that is.
Oh, so environmental, social, and government, right? So what are you doing to say, like, if you are building, how are your materials safe for the environment or not, right? Are they embodied carbon or not? And like, is your building one that is a healthy one, or is it one that is giving off a ton of emissions?
Hot topic. And did you find that, like for us in the consumer product industry, there's a history. It could be very different in your world. There's a history of applied AI, meaning people have been thinking about data lakes and machine learning algorithms for quite a while.
Yep.
That's not new.
No.
Generative AI is new. The combination of both actually for us is kind of like probably a bit of a detail here for later is really interesting. But does everyone in construction, did they know about AI? Like Did your customers know about it?
I think it's a journey, right? And I would say that we have folks that are, still working in some cases with pencil and paper, and we have folks that are on the leading cutting edge of AI and where that is going and pulling us in some cases. And I think that in a lot of this is there's this element of trust first with AI, right? And then once you have trust, you can move a little bit more to empowerment, right? And now when you're empowered, then you can partner essentially with AI to do things like agents. And then when you have that, you can start to reimagine your industry. And I want to be clear, when I say reimagine, I'm not talking about displacing the worker. I'm talking about displacing some of the tasks that are in place today, the repetitive things that slow the job down so that they can make the hard decisions on the job that they've seen a ton of times. So in my world, we're seeing is this idea of reactive, building trust, and proactive. The reactive space is one of something came at me and I need to know an answer, right? So I can do that and I can ask it. And like running a report, I can get a real-time response. Call, response, call, response. Doing that enough times starts to build trust, right? And then once you do that, you can start to have conversations. So the AI can help, meaning like where you are in a job site, what's happening. You can ask it questions. And the way that the software starts to tune to that is that it knows where you are. Right? It's not anywhere in the job. You're specifically doing one thing. And so when you're doing that, it can actually get more context. It can give you more answers, and then it can start to be proactive, right? And the proactive thing can say, hey, I see what you're doing, or I see this person is there based on their location, and I can start to give you some ideas of what might happen. Now, I almost liken that to first-year medical student, right? Ton of information, right? But no really applied knowledge of what's going on. They haven't done it 100 times, right? They still may be looking at a cadaver for the first time. These folks have done it a bunch of times. And so this allows them to make informed decisions based on the information that's available to them in almost real time. But I got to imagine that's got to be similar to things that you're facing as well.
I was literally about to say that. So I was going to try and paraphrase what you just said. Like, I think I had trust, empower, partner, and from reactive to proactive. And the fact that the repetition and location. So it's funny because there's so many parallels. I mean, they're completely different industries, but some of the thesis is kind of very similar. For us, for example, your location is really important because based on where you are, if you're a rep for a consumer goods company, your location drives a lot of your actions because you're in a particular retail outlet or a bar. And the next steps that you take might change. The advice given to you will change, and everything. What I have found though is when I speak to customers, and I put together like a talk track around the academic principles about why AI is going to boost your productivity and why it's going to do it. I think what were your words about the task automation that takes away that admin, that efficiency gain, like augmenting the employee to make them so much more efficient. My customers need the use case. Do you find the same thing? Like they get it, they get excited, but tell me how. Tell me, like, give me a for instance. Is something happen with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a concept of workflows, right? Yeah. And there's a number of workflows that are very specific to construction. Yeah. And the difference, I think, now when you're talking about just general AI, it's the jack of all trades. This is like in our world, it was like the generalists versus the specialists. Like this is the specialists, but all they do is for us, right? And so you have to understand those workflows. And first of all, to gain that, like that trust, that perspective, understand that use case, they want the ability to ask their own questions to start, right? And that was that kind of that reactive model. And then you can start to move because construction works in a lot of workflows, right? And our idea is to help them start to make those workflows more automated, right? We want to connect all of the workflows, but also connect all of the people. So in construction, we have three main groups of people that we work with. You have owners, you have general contractors, and you have specialty contractors, right? And all three of those parties need to work together in order to get something built. And that's where those workflows can go back and forth and they can get stuck in mass just repetition. So the ability for AI to help, right, eliminate some of the mundane, some of the repetitive work, that's where I think they can start to see the power of how this will work. But not everyone is there at the same time. So some people are still in the, I just want to call it, I just want to ask it a question, or I want it in real time. But I think that there is a lot around this piece. And it starts to, there's other elements, and maybe we'll table it for later, of institutional memory, right? Inside of a vertical is going to be more important, especially as people age out or go to somewhere else. You may have lost your best employee, right? They may have retired. They may have moved to a different company.
I literally have that scenario going on right now. One of my top customers, where key person who's been there for like 20 years is about to take a step back. And he was saying, if only there was a way to capture what's in my head so everyone could use it. I said to him, just go on a store visit, record what's in your brain, just record it, just talk into the thing. We'll transcribe it, we'll shove it into an AI engine. Kind of funny. I think that you also raised another great point, which is, I think in many of the demonstrations you see in the public domain, it's like a use case where single user, single issue. But what you're describing is workflow that spans multiple personas, and like there's an evolved state of this where the productivity is not just about one user, one task, it's multiple people doing a project or a workflow, whatever you want to call it, of multiple tasks where the whole thing is now elevated.
Yes. So here's where like it can get really interesting. And obviously this is a conversation I think that is broader. And here's where like some of the generalist conversation comes in, is that as you build trust, right, and you've created this agent of trust inside of your workflow, that agent can then potentially work with somebody else's agent, right, doing the work for you back and forth. Now, again, what's different is the actual workflows themselves. And when you need human interaction into that, so maybe the two agents disagree and it actually needs a human intervention, or it comes to a decision and now the person can take charge of that. One of the
important. It's important.
Oh, yeah.
Human decision making has to stay there. Actually, regulation and law in a lot of instances, like it's not autonomous without people. I think that's important. Yeah.
And there was an example that we were using around memory, institutional memory.
Yeah.
And the use case, the example was around building a cathedral, right? And cathedrals are complex and they're large and they're ornate. And there was this idea of there was very special marble that was used. And in that special marble, you have to be skilled in it. You have to have used it before and you have to be able to cut it a specific way. But guess what? There's only so many people that understand what that is. Now, if your entire job category, like all the jobs that you have done, all the projects you've worked on were digitized, you could find the people that have done that once, twice, three times, in what part of the world, right? For how long did they do it? And so now, whether they are there or not, you've captured their movements, their size, what happened, what went wrong, shipping delays, where they got it from, right? All in a way to say, hey, who should I get to help me build this cathedral, right? That's the general question, but it's able to go back and look through all of that content and use case to get you that.
That's a great story to bring it to life. One of the things that I was thinking about as you were telling us that was, we sometimes in our talk track with the market is we differentiate between what we call horizontal AI and vertical AI. And not because one is good or bad, but because I think that I try to make clear distinctions about horizontal AI. And I say, look, the way I describe it is horizontal AI is, look, everyone's used ChatGPT, something like that. Please help me write an email. Let me write a letter to complain about my parking ticket. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's loads of good horizontal use cases that make me better and more productive, but I wouldn't ask those engines to do a medical diagnosis.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. So that would seem everyone instinctively reacts to that. It kind of it's the use case that cuts through because, hey, I've got a pain, like we were talking about back pain earlier. I've got pain on my back. I somehow instinctively know that the expertise does not exist in a horizontal solution.
Yes.
One of my fears or challenges or minor frustrations is when people use horizontal AI technology like see Microsoft Copilot. It's probably great. But when you talk about the use cases, we're talking about if the customer's experience is, help me write a PowerPoint for a pilot project, and then you get like a deck that's got an airline pilot in it, and it's not a project pilot, and now it's all haha, it becomes a bit of a joke because it's wrong, and you have to iterate the prompts. I feel that those use cases detract from the value and the credibility you're going to get with vertical AI. I saw I was a bit long-winded. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, do these things distract from what we can do? Do you ever see that?
They can distract, right? Because you might think like, hey, it's a generic use case that doesn't apply to me. And I think this gets back to what you were talking about, is people need to be able to see it.
Yeah.
Right. Once they see it, there has to be an easy way to empower. And I think that was that next thing is like, I trust it now. I'm asking it questions. It's giving me the right answers generally, or I know that I can interfere. Now, how can I empower myself, or how can I customize this for my specific workflow, for my specific process? And in construction, things change all the time. Schedule is key. And in some cases, you will order duplicates of things just to ensure arrival, right? I remember I was on a job site. It was a crime lab that they were building. And I said, what's that?
What, sorry?
A crime lab, right?
Oh, really? So was it like the forensics team or something?
All the forensic, yeah.
Like CSI?
Like CSI. That was being built.
That's quite exciting. But with my customers, I go to really expensive bars and stuff like that.
I think you might have won that. So maybe I'll join you for, just a little bit of research.
My customers make premium spirits and anyway, go on. It's quite exciting.
Okay. So we're on site, with my boots that were clearly new. So they knew that I was, from the office and not the field. Yeah. But there was a big pile. I was like, what is that? Like, that is the bane of my existence. And it was a big truck of rebar. And I said, well, what's it doing there? It looks like, foundation's done. And everything else is ready to go. And they said, yeah, well, we weren't sure if the rebar was going to come on time. So we ordered another truck. And I said, well, what do you do with it now? They're like, well, sell it back to the person who sold it to me, probably for less, right? And they can sell it again. And so now you're talking about a scenario where they were having that, right? That problem where they had to order both. You could say, like, maybe if you had agents, they would be tracking, right, where things were and automatically canceling and reordering. But if you flash forward even further, when they won the job, right, that's when the AI can actually look through the documents that are received that are very specific. They call out all the things that need to happen and actually start that process for you, right? Alert you to those things in real time. We see a shortage overall, right? It can go look for those things. And that's where it can get really exciting, when it can start to take away some of the mundane and the tasks that they're going to have to do anyways. But it's just going to prompt you with a few different things. Congratulations on winning. Here are the things that you typically do.
How long is it going to take the world to adopt this stuff? Like, I know it's happening now. We all know, everyone on this call knows this technology is real. You can do it now. But it feels to me there's a switch coming where the paradigm shift will actually happen. How long is it going to take?
And it's kind of a loaded question, right? Like, how long does it take before we have like fully automated robots? How long does it take before like really AI is just in its current state takes hold? I mean, you're starting to see things like, Mark Benioff, like talking about pivoting the entire company around it. Yeah. So that obviously in a company like that, that's a big move.
Yeah.
I think like anything else, there are going to be people that are way out front, and they're going to be your forward thinkers. Your laggards are going to come along. I mean, I think that we have a couple of years, honestly, before all the trust is truly gained. But when you start to see this in a way that says, hey, if I'm more efficient, I can help some of these challenges, and they're framed up in the right way. I can help project predictability. I can help with productivity. I can help with your labor because I can make the tasks more automated for you. I can help with ESG. That is what will start to win the favor.
It's the use cases. I totally agree.
Josh,
go ahead, Andy. I'm sorry.
So I was going to ask, Josh, I know it's quite a broad question for a whole industry, but do you find your users quite forward thinking? Are you being pulled along with this, or are you having to sell the dream?
Yes and yes. So like the answer is yes, just like everywhere else. I mean, there's some companies that are pulling us, right, with things that they want to do around geolocation, mapping, spatial. They want like, to drop a little egg on top of a job site and a 3D model pops up. Like that's where some people are at. That's where some people are pulling to get to that. We have other folks that are just trying to digitize their documents right now to help move that proverbial cart that's actually on the job site, right? With all the designs and the redrawings and things like that. Though, like we're somewhere in the middle. And regulation is another thing that's helping push and pull us along. Europe is one of the leading examples from a regulation and things that we need to be able to do. And so we need to also just finish our swing and do all the things on our product. We can't just go full stop on AI. It's a big piece, but there's a lot of things we're doing just to help construction in general as well.
Yeah, that's important. People forget that. It's the same with us.
Yeah.
Of course, we're doing so much on AI, but there's an underlying product advancement that is still going on, at the same time. The thing, if I go back to that timing thing, I've got a little bit of theory about this. I forget who the old saying was, but you tend to overestimate what will be achieved in a year and completely miss and underestimate what happens in 5 or 10 years. And I suspect we're in one of those situations. And I think the adoption of AI, I think that this is my thesis, is vertical AI is actually going to cause quite acceleration because the use cases will be so impactful. If you don't adopt it, but your competitor does, your company performance will radically be different. And the forcing function is such that even if you have like loads of trepidation, loads of concerns, you will be kind of dragged along because otherwise you just won't be able to compete. You can't, the cost of labor will be disproportionate because people are so much more efficient. The effectiveness of a company using AI will be so much higher. So I think that I think it's one of those things where it'll be growing. It's only bang. It'll be like an exponential effect because you're either doing it or you're out. I know, is that too dramatic?
No, it's interesting because some of that I think is generational as well, right? So I'll give you like an example from yesterday. My daughter was having a problem with like understanding a concept, and she asked AI, but it was like AI through Snapchat, and it gave her a way to understand the concept in a way that I probably couldn't even have given her. So they're growing up with this, right? They don't want AI to solve their problems; they want them to help. And I think people can look at it as it's not doing it instead of me; it's doing it for me. And some of the things that we'll start to see is it's going to be there, and people aren't even going to notice. Right?
It's just there. Yeah.
They're going to get their next assignments on where they're supposed to go on the job site. And they're going to be like, great. But they're not going to understand that what was happening in the background is it was doing a lot of different calculations on where it could have sent somebody. And the most efficient that it did was putting that person there.
It's so funny you brought that up. We literally were practicing some demos earlier today. And we were thinking we have to tell people what's going on because it's invisible. It just happened. Right. It's not like you're talking to a chatbot. Like every AI demo seems to have a chatbot, which is important. It's not denigrate it, but some of the stuff you wouldn't even see.
Right.
Yeah. Just on that, I think that Snapchat example, we talk about a concept of touchless operations in vertical AI, and it's this multimodal thing where it doesn't have to be chatting with an agent through text. It could be taking a photograph. It could be voice. It could be video. Any experience in that space of just using different modes to interact?
Just the agentic interface, right? Like, do we need software to like click into things anymore? Like, absolutely. Like, these are things that, especially in construction, there's an idea of like punch, where you're walking through and it's a checklist of things that need to be done, right? And there may be a hole in the wall, there may be a window that's misplaced or is broken, and you have to take a picture of that. That picture captures where you are. It can even capture what floor. And when you're done, you can just say broken window, right? And you're speaking into it, and then it will automatically route that to the person it's supposed to go to, the information of what you should do next. Like those things, those workflows are starting to happen. The ability to just use your phone, especially on the job site. I mean, remember, a lot of people are wearing gloves. So we have to be thinking about things like voice, right? Not even to be able to touch to hit the microphone. It just needs to wake up the phone and be able to speak into it. So those are things that are very common use cases that we would see on the job site that we're very excited for. And like, I think things like that, that's what will get people to be like, oh yeah, it's easier for me. We talked about this, and I'll make it personal in my own life, right? And on the jobs, like SEs do a ton of work, As do a ton of work, and now all of our calls are recorded. So why should we fill out fields in Salesforce? Like we can just write a prompt now that like literally gives us all the information and it formats it better than we could have, and we can edit. So I think if I like take that to a vertical, the more that you can give people something back, right, where it helps them do their job, like, oh my God, I was going to have to write all this, and now it's kind of done, and I can edit and tweak the last 20%. Okay, like I'm in at that point. Like I'm sold a little bit more.
I'm totally with you. It's funny because we obviously have known each other from the past, and coming into this podcast, we thought there'd be points of commonality, things we could relate to, but it's completely exceeded my expectations because there's just so many. It's funny your example of like they've got gloves, they're going to talk to. It's just like it's so similar. Actually, it's completely different industry, obviously, but so many points of reference, the similarities is kind of funny. What's your take? So maybe just for full disclosure for everyone, Josh and I are old colleagues from Salesforce and the glory days of CRM back in the 2000s and what do you call them? The tweens. Yeah. What do you think about the Agentforce announcements? And of course, Oracle has an equivalent, and I think that all the major systems of record have some sort of agentic technology now. I think it seems to be the thing. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think your perspective is based on where you are in this process, right? So if you are in like the VC space, it's coming tomorrow, right? Because that's what they're investing in. That's what they want to happen. And I think that when you're in a company like Salesforce, you are pulling an industry forward. You are making an announcement that everybody needs to make this shift. And I think that happens takes a little more time, right? We were both there when we saw the idea of like Chatter or Slack, right? Communication on a record, communication in a group. And you needed to hit it a couple times for everybody to kind of really get on board and then almost force it. And then you have something like Slack that comes in that really disrupts and says like, oh yeah, this is just easier than email. I mean, I literally don't check my email like half as much, a quarter as much as I used to. Like, it's just crazy because most of the conversation is happening in that medium and in that format. And so I think when our first answer is, great, I understand what this is. How do we automate this process? Like, how much do we actually have to do versus, and that's going to be a little bit of leadership. It's going to be a little bit like how big your company is and where you are in that spectrum of like, VC to like Coca-Cola, right? 1,000 person company.
I agree with that.
Now, I mean, you see it on the consumer side, and like I mentioned Coca-Cola, like huge company, right? Do you have a different perspective? Do you see it coming a lot faster, or do you see it kind of taking a little bit of time?
What I see, I actually just hosted an executive dinner a couple of weeks ago, and there was a number of leading consumer goods companies. I probably shouldn't mention the names, but let's just imagine listeners would know the brands. The common theme was interest, deep interest, looking for direction and examples. The experience with Copilot, which I've heard from a couple of companies, is very mixed. So the first baby steps are, look, I could do this, and like they get like a few adopters who become really good at it, and then a general sense after 3 months of we're not sure if the productivity of anything changed. They can't quantify it. And actually, it's interesting because one of the lessons that I've learned is when we bring our stuff to market, we've got to tell people how to quantify this to help them. Because when they do this, if you just let them loose, that's why a big thing for us has been the personas and the use cases. So that when I used to write account plans before, it took I don't know, an entire day. Now it takes me a few seconds. Quantified, qualitative, right? Like when you do that, then you can explain it and do it. So the experiences I'm seeing is that's why I asked you the question earlier about horizontal versus vertical was
Yeah.
one of my regrets is some of the horizontal stuff is kind of giving them a little bit of a don't really know what difference it made type feeling. And of course, they're paying for it and they're being asked to pay a lot of money for it. So you get this kind of funny thing. So I think that it's been helpful for me because I know that when we bring our stuff to market, I have to be really explicit about start with this use case, you get this value, etc. And then I think that once the market is educated, once people become expert, once that generational shift has happened, I think it will somewhat just take off on its own. But I also think you guys were talking earlier about some of it's invisible and it's just there. You don't even know. Yeah,
Right.
that I mean, imagine if imagine you want to buy software today. You know how in the old days it used to be cloud or on-premise?
Yeah.
And then it became you can't really buy on-premise. It's actually hard to find now. It's kind of like gone. How can you buy software today that doesn't have AI in it? Like
Right.
it's actually going to become hard to buy anything that doesn't have AI in it
Yeah.
because everyone's putting it in it. So,
But
like,
Dom, I think
yeah,
it's a really important point here about some of the experiences with Copilot is just because you give users a clever technology doesn't mean they know what to do with it. And I think it keeps coming back to use cases. It's like, you can't give a user a clever bit of tech. You might find a good way to use it, but you might not. And that's why a use case is so different because you're saying, this is what you can use and it's going to make you better.
that's why I think our companies have actually, in a weird sort of way, an advantage because we're not horizontal companies. We're thinking about that use case to do that job. I'm not thinking about how to write emails for literally every use case in the world or every PowerPoint for a PowerPoint for a school project or for a business presentation or for, a family fun holiday. Like, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to try to get it right in a value-based framework. Use cases that are related to an industry, you do this, you're going to get this value. It's kind of obvious. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so with you. Like, there's the idea of time saving, and I think that in construction, people know the back and forth can take a lot. And to your point, I think we start with really common processes, right? Like an RFI for us, which is not an RFI as you probably know it, which is like that piece of the document that you respond to. This is actually a request for information on the drawing itself.
Right.
Okay? So that use case is like everyone in construction. They're like, yep, I understand that, and I have my own workflow potentially, but I know it. And doing it in that context, they're like, okay. Right, they will at least think about how much time it would save them. Like for me, for an SE organization, I can argue that conservatively, 30% of our time is probably spent entering information into a system somewhere. Right, where now we have something that records for us. We have a CRM, and then everything's in one spot. All I now have is a prompt book that I can use with the team, right? And they can say, hey, do X, Y, and Z for me. So, and it's searching through call recordings, all of the notes. And then the next week can say, just take the delta from last week to today. That's hours saved. That's, and even if it gives them the 30 minutes back or whatever, 30% time, they'll be like, great. So then it's a question of, if we get that time, do we recognize it?
Yeah.
And that's where I think there's this other piece of that's
a good point. That's a very astute observation. Yeah.
Oh, what do we do with it? Did I just waste it? Doing something? Did I use it to make myself and my process more efficient? So I'm with you. I think that your use cases have to be well defined and very tight, right? To start. And when people are like, yes, that's when trust to empowerment goes. Got it. For us, okay, we got all the stuff in one place. I want to write my own prompts.
Yeah.
Right. When people are saying okay, I got what you're doing, but now we have our special sauce. So I want to be able to tweak it a little bit and do this and change that. So I get this type of response, or I get it formatted this way, or send it to that person instead. That's where I think they're like, oh, I have a new power, right? And my power is making everything faster. Or my power is I don't have to answer emails till 12 o'clock at night. And then my phone's blowing up at 6 o'clock the next morning with an issue of things going on because we had cameras monitoring the site at night, and we made sure everybody got off the site safely, and there were no incidents today. So then it's I I get back to what do you do at that time? How have you recognized it? Or did you just get subsumed with
I've got a personal
wondering?
problem, Josh. I'm going to come clean on the podcast and say that actually I get anxious and stressed if I have free time. Like something's wrong. I should be doing something. But let me ask. I just realised we can talk about this further. I have one last question actually for both of you. Maybe Andy, I ask you this first.
Yeah.
Since not just our own technologies, but everybody else's AI technologies, has your management style changed because of AI?
Yeah, my expectations have changed. I think that's the biggest thing. And again, it's back to the use cases. I think as a manager or someone managing, you got to get hands on yourself, understand what it can do. And then I think anyone with experience of AI and knowing what it can drive in terms of productivity and accuracy and just creativity, if you're not changing your expectations of your team with that, I think you're missing something. So yeah, I think small companies can become big companies overnight just because I'm not saying we're replacing employees, but they're definitely adding superpower type strengths to the current employees. And so yeah, I think it's all about expectations. I think we expect more as managers now if we understand the use cases and what it can do.
Yeah, what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think, slowly, right? Where the expectation of what we can look at and review, how much we can cover the business expands greater. So where you're like, I think in a pre-sales domain a lot, but like our handoff is super important. And now I can use AI to say, like, did we ask all the right questions? So then I can check our own discovery. And then I can make sure with
We do that. It's
like
funny. We do that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so our ability to not only manage better, but help our teams like start to go into that creative space a little bit more and use that time to say, what can I do to improve myself, get better at things like discovery, improve my storytelling capability, go deeper on a job site and go talk to our customers more because I don't have to take quite as many notes because the call is recorded. It does a pretty good job and I trust it at this point. So I think it's being more in the business, to quote one of my friends, as opposed to on the business. They can be in it a bit more.
Well, one of the things that probably people that know me would probably say it's a good and a bad thing is I've got probably a drive, a personality type, like why is it not done yet type feeling is always in my mind. But one of the things I've realized every time I delegate a task or somebody to go off and do whatever it might be, like write a document or best practice or a knowledge arc, it really doesn't matter what it is. I suddenly realize I now don't understand why it isn't done immediately because I know how fast it could be constructed or how fast a problem can be solved. So when I hear about things that take, I kind of said to somebody the other day, I said, if it takes more than a day to get this done, can you just check? Like, because surely, like, there's some things like sophisticated engineering and things that, of course, you think that requires finesse, but so much now should just be finished like that. So why isn't it? I find that actually, if you looked at the Aforza employee productivity, I think in the last 3 months it's probably rocketed. I would find it hard to quantify properly, but I would say between 25 to 40% productivity, like just the sheer output of employees, the rate of it is rocketing.
Yeah.
You feel that way, Andy, for us?
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one thing in there, I go back to trust, right? So as soon as somebody finds an anomaly, and the anomaly,
then it's backwards.
They're like, yeah, do I have to question everything they say?
Yeah. It's like snakes and ladders. You go all the way to the top and it's right back down again.
Yeah, and data is a really big thing. We come to things like quarterly business reviews and things like that, and then you're constantly doing your check and balance, and then you're trusting, and then all of a sudden you'll see something that's an anomaly, and you're like, wait a minute. And then if it comes true, you're like, then you've gone down the ladder again, right? You got to go like back up the chute.
Although I do have like an AI nose now, so one of my pet peeves is when I get a response from somebody like, that's been written by an AI engine, like you can't tell. You'd be like, no, you didn't think about that at all. Yeah,
I'm right here. I'm on the call. I didn't do it one time. I was just testing it out.
I had a question for both of you. So you've both known each other for a couple of decades now, right? Is there
I guess. Yeah, that's true. Actually, when did we meet?
More than two decades for sure.
Yeah, what the hell? Yeah.
You think back over that time, is there anything, is this the biggest shift you've seen in your software career, your cloud career? Is there anything bigger than this? Is there anything that excites you more, or is this really seismic and different?
Singing so many moments,
Yeah.
cloud computing, mobile computing. Actually,
Yeah.
for me, a big moment. I remember, Josh, do you remember when Salesforce, I can't remember the guy's name, Craig somebody, was it? The guy who invented Apex, the fact that you could do triggers in a multi-tenant system, for me, that was like, that's a seminal moment.
Craig
Uh,
Weissman.
yeah. Um, but in short, I think, Andy, no, nothing compares to the magnitude of the changer, because I think this has the most potential to have like literally a species defining moment, because probably economics and human society are going to change in the next 10 years because of it. It's probably that
Yeah.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, everything felt like the biggest thing in the moment, right? When you talk about
Yeah.
like shift to cloud,
Yeah.
we talked about the shift to mobile, and now the shift to AI. The other thing is just the curve and like how fast it's progressing and what it's pushing in things like data centers and quantum computing and everything else. Like what it's doing to everything else around it is what's crazy to me, and that's why I think it's one of the biggest things that we've seen, because it's not just it's like, again, all the surrounding pieces. Like data centers are like stopping and restarting and they're rebuilding for like different formats, right? They're thinking about quantum and all these elements, and that's what's so crazy.
It's Josh, such a pleasure to see you, my old friend. Thanks so much. This is like a really great conversation. I'm sorry we're like 6,000 miles apart. Otherwise, I said it's time for beer o'clock and we could go talk about it more in the bar. But I hope to see you soon, my friend.
Yeah, you're much closer to beer o'clock than I am right now. I'm just getting started, and y'all are just wrapping up for the day. So I really appreciate it. Hopefully that I think it was a great conversation. It was a ton of fun to see all the parallels when we're in vertical versus horizontal. I
Yeah,
think we both can agree that this is something that will take away tasks and not humans, right?
yeah.
And the idea is to make them more capable, more flexible. And yeah, I'm really excited about the future. It's not a bleak one in my mind.
No, definitely not. Very, very exciting. Thank you, Josh. Thank you,
Thank
man.
you.